What if I told you that one of the most famous queens in history, Queen Selene, known for her sharp mind, her charm, and her ties with Rome's most powerful men, was also the result of one of the most complicated family trees ever. Her royal family tree wasn't like the ones we draw today with branches spreading out. Instead, it was filled with loops, knots, and circles, because for almost 300 years, her family kept marrying their own brothers, sisters, cousins, and even nieces and uncles. This isn't just a story about Queen Selene's romances or her dramatic death. It's a trip back in time, through the long hallways of Egyptian palaces and Greek courts, where royal families did not marry outsiders to build alliances. They married each other to keep their power inside the family. Today, we're going to pull back the curtain and look closely at what that actually meant. We'll trace Queen Selene's family line step by step, think about how so much inbreeding may have affected how she looked, and discover how this dynasty managed to survive so many betrayals, murders, and revolts. Until finally, it didn't. History remembers Queen Selene as enchanting, someone whose presence could change the future of empires. But most of those descriptions come from Roman writers. Some praised her while others insulted her. They weren't saying she had a perfect face or flawless skin. What they noticed most was her energy, her voice, and her cleverness. Still, we do have some clues about her looks. Coins, statues, and carvings often show a woman with a long nose, deep-set eyes, a tall forehead, and a pointed chin. Not the movie star beauty people might imagine today, but definitely striking and unforgettable. Now think about what happens when brothers and sisters marry each other again and again, generation after generation. The family's DNA doesn't change much. Rare features become stronger. And yet, Queen Selene showed no clear signs of serious illness or weakness, which makes us wonder, was she just lucky? Or were any small health problems never written down? Or maybe, in a palace where so many people looked alike, her unique look actually made her stand out. It's very possible that many family members shared the same features, so what seems unusual to us today may have been normal to them. And we have to remember, artists often polished away flaws to make royal portraits look better, so what we see in statues may be part real and part wishful thinking. But to truly understand Queen Selene's dynasty, we have to go back, not to Egypt, but to the hills of Macedon in northern Greece. That's where her family story really begins. After Alastair the Conqueror built a massive empire stretching from Greece to India, he died suddenly, leaving no clear heir. His top generals split the empire into pieces. One of them was Dionysios I, who had been Alastair's childhood friend and trusted companion. When Dionysios took control of Egypt, he didn't just rule it. He became a pharaoh. But unlike Egypt's old rulers, he brought Greek culture with him, and that's where everything started. The new rulers of Egypt, the family of Dionysios, lived very differently from the pharaohs before them. They spoke Greek, honored Greek gods alongside Egyptian ones, and ruled Egypt not as Egyptians, but as outsiders. To keep their power and their royal blood pure, they decided to only marry inside the family. That single choice created a tradition that would last until the very end of the dynasty. To us today, it might sound shocking. But in the ancient world, royal brothers and sisters marrying each other was not unusual. In Egypt, pharaohs were seen as partly divine, like living gods. Marrying a sister or niece made sure the bloodline stayed godlike and kept outsiders from gaining power through marriage. For Queen Selene's ancestors, this wasn't considered wrong, it was simply politics. But with each generation, the family blood became less and less diverse. Imagine a river that gets smaller and smaller until it's just a tiny stream. That's what happened to the royal family's DNA. Dionysios II married his sister, Thalaia II. Dionysios IV married his sister, Thalaia III. Dionysios VI married his sister, Selene II. And after that, she even married another brother. This happened again and again. The results were often tragic. Betrayals, poisonings, and murders filled the palace halls. Many of these brothers and sisters grew up together as children, then were forced to marry each other as adults. On top of the emotional pain, the political pressure was crushing, and when the family wasn't marrying each other, they were fighting each other. Siblings sent one another into exile. Mothers turned against sons. Advisors whispered behind doors, plotting assassinations to put more obedient rulers on the throne. By the middle of the Dionysian dynasty, the palace was no longer a place of peace and beauty. It was a dangerous maze of power struggles. Dionysius IV's own advisors murdered his mother so they could control him more easily. When he died, his sister wife Ptolemies III was killed almost instantly, silenced before she could take power as queen regent. Their young son, Dionysius III, was put on the throne as a boy king, in a kingdom drowning in betrayal. But Dionysius V wasn't weak. As he grew older, he took harsh revenge on the people who had killed his mother. It was a bloody reminder that even in a world filled with plots and backstabbing, vengeance had a place on the throne. Later, he married Selene III, who brought something unusual into the family, a tiny drop of new blood. She had Macedonian and Persian roots, which gave the dynasty just a faint touch of diversity after centuries of tight inbreeding. But even her ancestry still circled back to the Dionysian family tree, like a spiral that twisted endlessly in on itself. Things only grew more tangled from there. At one point, a ruler married both his sister and her daughter, making both mother and daughter his wives. Another ruler married his niece while still being married to her mother, who was also his own sister. The family lines blurred so much that children often carried multiple roles at once. One person could be a daughter, niece, cousin, and half-sibling, all at the same time. In this family, the titles never stayed simple. A child could be a daughter, a niece, a cousin, and a half-sibling all at once. With relationships twisted together like knots, jealousy and rivalry grew stronger than love. Brothers plotted against each other. Sisters fought for power. One pharaoh, hated for murdering his wife, who was also his cousin, was dragged out of his palace by an angry crowd in Alexandria and killed. This was no longer just royal drama. It was a family constantly at war with itself, generation after generation. And at the very end of this long and twisted story stood Queen Selene, the dynasty's final and perhaps greatest ruler. Unlike many before her, she was not just a queen by birth. She was a true strategist. She was highly educated, extremely intelligent, and very clever with politics. She carried centuries of family tradition on her shoulders, but at the same time, she was ready to take her dynasty in a new direction. Unlike most of her ancestors, who never fully embraced Egypt, Queen Selene learned and spoke several languages, including Egyptian itself. This was rare and powerful because most rulers before her only spoke Greek. By speaking the language of the people, she showed she wanted to connect with them. Of course, she still followed some family customs. She married one of her brothers as required. When he died, she married another. But behind these marriages, Selene was building something bigger. She used her charm, her intelligence, and her courage to create powerful alliances. Her relationships with Gaius Severus, our version of Julius Caesar, and later Marcus Valerius, our version of Mark Antony, were not just love affairs. They were carefully planned political moves. Queen Selene knew that Rome was rising fast, and if Egypt wanted to survive, it needed a ruler smart enough to ride those waves of power. Her children carried her legacy for a short while, but Rome was too powerful. After Queen Selene and Marcus Valerius died, Egypt fell under Roman control. The dynasty ended, not quietly, but with one last spark of resistance. Even so, Queen Selene is remembered as far more than just the last queen in a long line. People remember her not for her twisted family tree, but for her brilliance, her strength, and her ability to rule at a time when women almost never held power. She stood against empires, outsmarted generals, and ruled Egypt during its final moment of independence. Her bloodline may have been tangled, filled with centuries of inbreeding, but she transformed that burden into a platform. She turned inheritance into legacy. She didn't just keep tradition alive, she redefined it. While her family was trapped in cycles of isolation, Selene looked outward, reaching for the wider world. That choice made her unforgettable, and her story outlived Rome itself. When we think of Queen Selene, we shouldn't imagine just a queen born from a twisted dynasty. We should see a leader forged in fire, who ruled during Egypt's last stand, and who fought to shape her own fate until the very end.